Dr. SAMMY WAINAINA, Provost of the All Saints Cathedral in Nairobi, is here with us in the studio. A very good morning to you.
Very good morning.
Good to have you again on the show at the beginning of the new financial year, you know?
Oh, is it?
Yes. So you're here so that we can now start this financial year nicely and properly.
Well, I didn't bring any money.
No?
Don't worry. Have no fear.
Do not worry. The money we have.
Oh, the money you have.
Yes.
Okay.
Silver and gold you may not have none, but we have. Chisi pesa. Tuko nayo. How are you doing?
I am well, by God's grace. I'm in good health. The cathedral is well, because that's where, first and foremost, I'm concerned about. And my family is well. Can't complain.
Good. It's clear that you are well because of a sermon that you delivered yesterday as well. Ndu,
Yes.
can we just do the intro to that sermon?
So yesterday,
Yes.
I mean, there were questions. There've been questions, rallying around, and it seemed as though it was maybe almost planned on your part to end this month as we get into this one last stretch of 30 odd so days towards the election, and in no uncertain terms, you were asking Kenyans to make a decision not based on the individuals who are coming and, making all sorts of promises, but saying we need to put our faith and hope in institutions that should hold up the country and not individuals. You further then went on to say, or maybe this was before that, you earlier had said, look, where are these people are making promises to you? Where are the fulfillment of the promises that they made to you 5 years ago? And you said very clearly, those are the questions that you Kenyans should be asking yourselves before you make the decision. You did not favor anyone. You did not spare anyone in this. And you were very clear that if those who made the promises have not fulfilled their promises, their ilk should then not be given an opportunity to come back and rule.
Well, this did not start now. It started actually last year. What I do as the provost is to reflect on a biblical theme that would guide the cathedral. But cathedral is not just a local church. It's a church with national outlook and international outlook. Therefore, whatever we do there affects what happens in the nation and in the world. And last year, as I reflected about the focus this year, God took me to Haggai chapter 1, verse 12. And the phrase there is, consider your ways, or check on your ways. And I felt that was a very appropriate theme, given the kind of year that we had. So January, I spent time to get people deeper to understand the context in which Haggai is prophesying. And there's something special in Haggai chapter 1, and people can read it, especially from verse 15. There is what we would call a Trinitarian pact between God, the leadership, and the people. Remember, the accusation in Haggai is that they are not building the temple, they are busy building their good homes. It's not that God is against them building their economy. God is against their focus, their priority. It is not on him, it's actually on them. And I think I was applying that yesterday. But just to help you understand the Trinitarian formula there is, for a nation to grow, the focus on God is important. Reverence, fear of God is important. Number 2 is the leadership. And we have 2 types of leadership. We have the political and the religious leadership. And if you listened to me yesterday, I didn't just talk about politicians. I talked about the church itself as an institution that has been captured and enslaved by systems in this country, and therefore they are not able to speak. And I said, if the church is in that state, then it can't heal the nation. Sometimes we put too much pressure on the church, but the church itself, if it is in trouble, then it cannot be able to heal. And what you see is when the leadership, both political and religious, had reverence to God and refocused people to God, the next thing was people being obedient to God. And then after that, you read a verse that says, I am with you. So God's presence comes when the political leaders lead people to God, and the religious leaders as well. And so I knew I would come back in July in my preaching calendar to prepare people for a civic education. And there are 2 conferences that have happened. Last year, we did one on church and politics. And this year, the Anglican senior leaders, that is clergy and bishops, met, and we have had materials. But the third thing that I gave to the members of the cathedral and the public was a meter, what you would call an integrity meter. And I said, before you elect anyone, it doesn't matter which party they are in. Please take them through this meter. But this was the warning. Please take that test yourself first. If you are better than the people that you want to elect, then you should have been the leader, not them. Because we must be candid about the leadership of this country. It is not to some few people who want to rock the system for their own selfish benefits. If you are not better, then now take them through the test and see who is then the best to represent you. And I've said it. Politicians are not our bosses. I think in Kenya we have given too much premium on our politicians. We keep bowing at them as if they are demigods, and they are not. They are our servants. And time like this one is time to humble them and tell them, you know what, guys, I'm the one who employs you. And before I employ you, you have a test to pass.
I've got to take you through some interview process. What are the contents of this integrity meter?
Well, the integrity meter talks about especially four issues, and I want to refer to it very, very quickly. Number one is matters of integrity. Before you judge anyone on matters of integrity, you need to ask yourself, do you have integrity yourself? And I'm going to find it very quickly, but we can continue with any other thing that you may want us to discuss before I quickly dive into the meter. Yes, because always the problem is to put a lot of pressure on the politician. But the system produces people. Politicians are produced by the same society. And so if the society cannot pass the meter,
if we can't pass the integrity test,
how will they
subject
others into the integrity?
I want to respond to what
the Provost is saying.
Yes, where his mention of the pressure that is put on the church. I am of the view that it's insufficient.
Insufficient pressure.
It's not sufficient. The reason why it isn't sufficient, the church, if I may be broad-minded, I would say religious institutions are the one place where every citizen of this particular country is on par. When you come to church, same. God doesn't have nephews. God doesn't have nieces. God doesn't have uncles, aunties. Sons, daughters, full stop. What this means, therefore, is that all these people we referred to as Waheshimiwa, before and after, all these people we refer to as senior civil servants, right up to the presidency, right up to former prime ministers, at some point or the other, these people will subject themselves to the authority of the church. It's the one place where they come to, and when they are spoken to, whether they like it or not, they tend to listen. In fact, it's the only place where they actually listen. It's the only place where they can be told. Now, if the teller who is in this institution doesn't do that as often as they do, and you know your members, you know what they do, you don't hold them to account strictly and tell them, ndugu mpendwa, madada mpendwa, iko namna hii.
Consider your way.
Iko namna hii. Because the provost is a shepherd to everybody. who is a member of his congregation. It doesn't matter what you do or who you are. Same.
I want to agree totally. Actually, the religious institution should actually be under a lot of pressure because it is only the religious institutions where everybody is made equal. Unfortunately, the church doesn't put pressure on itself. And that was one of the concluding remarks yesterday. If you can't pass the meter yourself as an individual, because a church is not just a body corporate, it's also individuals. And we don't do that during the election time. We do it constantly. Every Sunday, we do it. And maybe here I need help. What is it? After all the preaching that happened on Sunday and during the week, why do we have a society that is actually under captive of systems that do not engender godliness in this country? But let me, so as I agree, let me talk about the meter. Number one, we need to check on blamelessness. And there is the description of the blamelessness. The second one is a leader who is empowering, visionary, inclusive, protector of human dignity and family values. Those are 5. If you want me to repeat: blamelessness, empowering, visionary, inclusive, protector of human dignity and family values. One of the reasons why I brought this one up is because I'm not just looking at the election in August. I want us to look at it going forward. Can we as a church, religious bodies, and as a nation use such a meter for a longer time to prepare people for election so that we are not reactive, we should be proactive. Now, and what it says is how to use the integrity vetting and monitoring and evaluation tool. So you are supposed to go there as an individual before you even think of another person. What is your level of blamelessness? Do you empower people as a person? Are you visionary? Are you inclusive? Do you protect human dignity and family values? If you do, you score yourself. Then against that, then I look at the presidential candidates, the gubernatorial, and other levels, because I also said yesterday, if you have it right at the presidency and you get it wrong at the other levels, sorry, even if you have a good guy at the top, the system will collapse. Actually, the opposite is true. Sometimes you don't have a very good president, but because systems, structures are working, then the country is held together.
Okay, so then are we inadvertently saying that if you go through this integrity meter as a would-be politician or would-be future leader in this country, then all these other promises, these many things that are being thrown at us, then essentially do not matter?
You know, if you go through the integrity as a person, you will not put pressure on any other person. But if you pass it, then you have the right to hold others accountable. Now, we put too much pressure on the politicians and the expectations, and I know why they promise. It is because they want to impress you.
It's because of the pressure they're feeling.
Yes, the pressure they feel. In fact, and I don't want to be the advocate, partly why the system is so corrupt is because you expect money from them. The handout culture in this country is sickening. I hear that every morning at a politician's home, there are people queuing for handouts. But let me tell you, it is worst when pastors are doing the same thing. I was in a conference for Christian aspirants. And one a current MP who is a practicing Christian said, let me tell you guys, the biggest problem are the pastors. I go into one location to meet the people, and by the time I leave, I have 20 cards inviting me, or I have this, I have a
Harambe
medical
this and the
harambe.
other.
I live with 10. In a day, maybe I'll have met like 10 groups. I'll have had 50 cards with me for different fundraising. Another guy who is a bishop told me of a very sad case. He wanted to run for a position in his rural home. And when they had, this is a bishop, all the church leaders said, you don't need to do anything. We are the ones who will do the campaign for you. You be our guest on this Harambe. So he was moving from the Anglican church to the Presbyterian to the Pentecostal. And he believed in them. Let me tell you, they fleeced him everything he had. And this is a bishop. He is being fleeced by the church members. Do you know you can even have a problem with the God of these people?
So they were not campaigning.
They were not.
He was attending
In
the
fact,
Harambes.
he didn't even get the votes. So it is even worse. And that's why I want to agree with my brother Moga, that it is even sadder when the church gets into part and parcel of that system.
But you know,
So even as we promise, because in political leadership, you need to promise. But and I asked yesterday, because you need to look at my sermon in totality, these manifestos that we are getting, do we even ever read them? Do we, can our economy be able to sustain such? Why do we believe in the lie so much? And even before they promise again, why don't you hold them accountable for what they had
For what they
promised
promised
earlier?
earlier. City.
you know, this is a chicken and egg situation. Because if I look back into history, I would be forced to argue that the politicians deserve to have people coming asking them for handouts because they created that culture.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yes.
They created it. It started off with the opposition who tell people, when people come with money, take the money, but vote for.
Kula, lakini
Yes,
kura.
Kura, yes. They
Yeah.
came up with it and they encouraged people to take money. There was a time when people did not expect politicians to give them money. Politicians were just ordinary members of the community who went to church. There are people whom you saw and talked to, you knew he was a member of parliament, but he was just an ordinary person. This elevated status, it is them who have given it to themselves.
Sure.
And what the people have done is they fitted in and said, oh, so this is where you are. Okay, fine. We'll fit in with you. You see, throughout the year, the church's mandate to talk to their congregation, the religious leaders' mandate to talk to their congregation, to revisit and then reject their value system so that they don't talk integrity, they live integrity. If there are then leaders with integrity, this discussion will be a different one.
It is.
It'll be a completely different one because what they'll be telling people, they'll be willing to tell people, look, I will not give you a handout. You decide whether you are going to vote for me or not. And they should be willing to accept that I will not be voted in if I'm not giving handouts. That should be their position. But the moment you compromise, you see, there's being generous. People come to your home and you welcome them. But then there's bribery, which you want to call whatever name you want to call it. But it is bribery.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, the moment you allow that sliver of deceit, why then do you complain when the rot sets in into the entire system? Because that's exactly what happens.
In fact, I'm more critical to the church than any other institution. I am told, reliably told, that in the rural parts of this country, the reason why pastors would even change a sermon that very morning because a politician has come is because an envelope has been passed. Or they are promised after this, we will. And surely they get handouts from the politicians. I agree.
So what do they change
The
sermon?
moment you open such an opportunity, you've lost the integrity, you will never question anyone. So it is sadder. And yesterday I asked the congregation, because the church is the individual, then you bring the body. I asked them, what is it that you do that makes the politician feel entitled to what they do. It's because you have built a culture that allows such to happen. Otherwise, if and back to what I had said earlier, if they were servants of the people, I would not need, like, I walk in town, I walk anywhere so easily because I haven't built a culture where me as provost, I'm adored by anyone. I don't. I'm simply a servant of the people, and I can drive myself, I can be with the people. I'm okay. I don't need any protection. I'm fine. But this elevated status of politicians, they did it, but we also did it.
Yeah, we allow it to happen.
We, the society, also did it. We, as the church, also allowed it to happen. And doing it will cost this country a lot. I don't know how it will be done.
Jeremiah 17 says, and I quote, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked." That's what Jeremiah says, not me.
What does that mean? Why is it that in Africa, we know Scripture, we apply Scripture, yet we are less godly? If you look at the most secular countries in the world, they are more developed, but more cultured, and people serve the society.
We have a dual religiosity. That's us.
How so?
Well, there is the us that goes to church and carries a Bible and goes to the family, and everyone knows to be upstanding. There is the us who visits the mganga when things aren't working exactly the way we want it to work. Then there is the us who is a businessman who takes all manner of shortcuts and steals when we can, but we hope that when we give huge sums to the church, God will be impressed and we will be okay.
Yeah, we've been told that by our church leaders.
The duplicity of the human mind. You see, the West, it's not that they are less duplicitous than us, but they uphold a certain integrity. Even with their secularism, they uphold integrity. And that's why you find that their systems work. They may not be religious, but I would argue that they are. It's just that they do not go around representing themselves as godly in the way that we do.
Provost, I know Eric wants to go to a break, but on that question, I mean, the question is, you're saying, look, if you hold anybody who's coming now against this meter and you're asking these questions and they fall short, then is the next step to not give them your vote as a Kenyan today.
Exactly. On what basis do you give somebody a vote?
So if you don't find any of the candidates on the ballot fitting the bill,
you made the
don't turn up.
You made the
vote.
mistake. No.
So what do you do?
No. You will. But you have made the mistake of expecting something from someone which does not happen. But
So-
just like in an interview, you score people. Because not everybody is evil. No, at least you can be able to say there's a lesser evil here. Is it one guy, I think it's Muluka, who said, eaten will be eaten. So you choose
Who eats you.
what will eat you. Unfortunately, when I scan even the presidential candidates, I look at them. You see, and this is what I say. If you marry a certain character, there should be some expectation and there should be some risks that go with marrying that kind of a person. As we go into the four, because currently we can talk of the four, please know there are consequences that go with certain. For example, and I'm only using this as an example, if you go Tingiza Mti and legalizing of marijuana and having hyenas in trouble, what kind of leader do you want? And you know, it's a joke that has been extended too far, and now young people are getting excited about it.
They
That
got
doesn't build.
excited a long time ago.
Yes, the excitement isn't even sustainable. It's actually based on some weed.
That's the problem. That is where the problem is, that you think it's a joke. It's not. 26 minutes to 8.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Nairobi.
Very Reverend Dr. SAMMY WAINAINA, Provost of the All Saints Cathedral. We are talking about that integrity question and how we select our leaders and pick our leaders from, what we... There's something that you had asked, Provost. we go to church on Sunday, we go to, mosques. And then in between the week, we are still consuming, religious content. But the way we are also behaving is going contrary to the kind of content we are consuming. How would you explain this? I mean, what causes this? Is it what CT was calling the duplicitous nature
the
of
dual identity of people? Isn't it a paradox that Kenya is 80% or more Christians?
87.
How do you explain that? And maybe me as an insider, I may not be the best to answer that question, but you people as outsiders, why is it that the religious culture has not been permeated into secular culture in this country?
It has actually.
No, let me make a certain discourse. And sometimes I look at it from the way maybe we received Christianity in Kenya. Remember, the Bible and the flag came together.
Yep.
One representing the colonial power, and the Bible helping in subduing the Africans to obey the flag. And so we received a religion of the colonizer that actually subjugated us as Africans. And you can look both in Kenya, but even going to South Africa with issues of apartheid, that people started looking at the Bible as a tool, an imperial tool by the colonizer. And even the interpretation of the same was against us. Unfortunately, the leadership that took over, whether it is the religious and the political, did not help in shaping the nation. When leaders get into power and the only thing they can do is to acquire chunks and chunks of land, and even sometimes religious leaders benefiting from the same, slowly, accumulatively, you're actually creating a culture. That people, when you start telling people about integrity, they are wondering, where have you been all along?
They view what you do as integrity.
Yes, and time has come that we stop talking and we do. Look at the problem of poverty in this country. The biggest problem in this country are the middle class. They are comfortable with their nice small houses, some nice car, their children can go to good schools, private schools. But the masses down there, and and yesterday I said in the sermon, it's only a matter of time. The poor will get so poor that they will come to the streets.
They have nothing to lose.
And yes, they have nothing to lose. And I have said many times without a number, if you have neighborhoods that are poor, it doesn't matter whether you put CCTV, razor wires, watchmen, and the bulldogs. It doesn't matter. Those people will come for you. And I'm not exciting Kenyans towards those kind of revolution. But why should we wait for such a time? And so I think at one point the national culture and the the culture of the religion did not fuse together towards nationalism. And that's why we have divergence when it comes to people applying their faith. So on a Sunday, they will be happy, and I see it. I preach, and immediately after that, somebody asks me for something, and I'm like, did you
just
listen?
get what I was saying?
Didn't you hear?
Yeah. You were doing your job. Now you're back out here.
And it's like they want to ask Provost for prayer to sanitize something. There are people who believe, and I don't know why clergy don't correct their congregants, that even if you stole and gave everything to God, God will never be honored by such sacrifices. And by the way, they shouldn't even be called sacrifices because you have stolen. And that's where, again, back to politicians, they think they can loot, give a few to the church to silence them.
Yeah.
That is wrong. That is actually wrong, and pastors should say should preach the truth of the gospel.
Provost,
But as I conclude,
yes,
let's not dichotomize too much about politicians and the general public, because it's one and the same. They all eat from the same. The preaching of the changing of the soul that you talked about in Jeremiah, you can't use one text alone as a standalone. You have to use the text with many other texts.
I have to contextualize it.
Because there is hope as you read the gospel that people can be changed. Nicodemus and the others were actually changed when they turned their hearts to Christ. There is hope for humanity in Christ. And although we are wicked, we can change. And all of us here, including myself, I'm not here because I'm the best. It's only by God's grace. And constantly the gospel continues to transform me. And that's the journey we've been called to. And so my appeal to the church where I serve, please just preach the gospel. And I have learned, if you just preach the gospel has the truth in it, has value in it, and has ability to change and transform people. Don't change the gospel because of people.
Several institutions, individuals over the last few months have been saying, Kenyans, you have a responsibility to put in a proper leader. It doesn't matter where we're looking from, current leadership, future leadership, civil society have been saying, you know what? We've seen this rot that has been there before. Now, going forward, make a decision. The responsibility then rests on the shoulders of Kenyans to make the right decision. Do you share that view as well, Provost? Do you share that view that it's Kenyans' responsibility? Where does the role of making sure that those who are seeking these positions of leadership have sanitized themselves as well?
Why are we talking about it now? And that's why the meter here should be applied for the next 5 years. We react. We are more reactive than proactive. If institutions, and yesterday I talked about institutions that hold a country together, institutions can create good cultures that can accumulatively change the culture of the people. Yesterday, one of the things that I said was, do not expect a miracle after August the 9th. The system is going to produce to you the leaders you deserve. Don't expect. And to me, the institutions are the only hope for this country. Politicians will behave like politicians. It is only the institutions, and there are many in chapter 15 of the Constitution, that can actually come together and start changing the narrative of the country. Like the judiciary. When justice is upheld, you start creating a culture of justice and people knowing they can get justice.
Can I take you back? There's something you've said which is absolutely true and gets the heart of the matter. Everything we talk about ends up in the houses of God, the religious houses, and it ends up with those who are leaders therein. If I look at, you asked the question, and that's what I'm referring to, that what problem do we have? You see, even within your church, within the churches, what religious organizations have is a competing religion. Because you look at what people do, it tells you what they believe. You look at how they go about their business, it tells you what they hold to be sacrosanct and what they give priority in their lives. In my mind, that is their religion. If you look at the culture we have of theft, of bribery, of impunity, it's what people gravitate towards. That's their religion. So, and it takes precedence in their life. And what then becomes the competing religion is Christianity or Islam. That's competing instead of the other way around. But then also, I have to question how it is we train our clergy and how we continuously upgrade them. Because among Christians, all I need to do is stand up and have 10 congregants. By the time I get to 20, I can call myself a bishop, and nobody's going to argue with me. And people will listen to me without understanding my training, my understanding of this being, this institution that I represent, without understanding how much I've delved into it and what it is of that institution I'm actually representing. Now, once again, the unfortunate thing is that we look up to our religion, we look up to our religious institution, we look up to our religious leaders. We actually do. But when they become like us and we can't tell a difference, when you have an election in a church and it mirrors a political election, then you feel here, you see now, the church has become the world. So where is the difference? And so even when they preach change, who will listen? Because they're not listening to their words, they see what you do. And and the feeling is, this person is not really different from everybody else.
Do we really look up to our religious leaders?
I do. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. And the reason why we do...
In practice and deed.
Yes.
Because, why I'm asking that is, you could argue that there are religious leaders who actually uphold what we call the values that they preach, right? And they have congregants. Now, if we picked just a number of religious leaders of like those, and then we know these are their congregants, can we say that you can go into a certain community and find people who live up to these values and they actually live up to these values openly and directly, and then are those ones now able to influence their community?
They exist. And then there are those, this is where I brought in the issue of these fellows who have these high positions. What sort of people are they? And it gets to the heart of the matter of the message that the Provost was preaching. Because it doesn't just exist in the leaders you want to elect. It exists in leadership in the church and leadership everywhere. I mean, let's leave the institution aside and ask this person, this very individual, what sort of person are you talking about? The integrity you speak of, are they individuals of integrity? Because it isn't difficult to tell that someone is an individual who upholds integrity. Exactly. It's not difficult.
It isn't. And you see, in every society, however rotten it is, there are remnants.
Yep.
And if you look at the Old Testament, prophets were not popular people. No, in fact, some of them looked very...
unkempt.
I was trying to
castaways.
Sanitize them, but CT has already used the word. But they were men and women of integrity.
Yes,
and they kept the message. And people wondered and they came back to the message of the prophet. Let me use Wangari Maathai's words, that just like the hummingbird, go get the drop of water, drop it on the fire.
Yep.
It may be
the only thing you can
the
do.
only thing you can do. Yeah. And I know the problem of our politicians is about money and power. That's what motivates them towards that. Unfortunately, and I want to agree with CT, who is becoming like a preacher now, even in the church, mostly what you see now, why do many people want to become bishops and archbishops?
Status.
Money
It's about
status.
money and power. And let me tell you, we blame politicians for use of power. Some bishops, the way they use power.
It's a grand thing to see.
Nobody can even challenge them. And if you dare do that, you are out or frustrated.
See, that's what they did to Jesus. It's not just current day bishops.
And let me tell you, there are systems in churches that engender power, status, money. But let me say this. Why don't we seek to be faithful as individuals? And Sunday, I'll dive deeper, not into the church as an institution, but as a Christian Kenyan. What will be your role? You do the right thing. Seek to do the right thing. And you can imagine the ripple effect of doing good.
Yeah.
I can influence Ndu. Ndu, you have a family of 5, for example. If you can influence them to do good, and I influence 5, all of us 5, you can see the ripple effect of influencing when people learn to do good.
Yeah.
This thing of feeling helpless is not good. No, we are not helpless. We can do something. And so this country belongs to us, unfortunately. And if a revolution will happen in the country, it should happen in the church as well.
And it would take
And
time.
the church cannot heal the nation if they are entangled in the same problems, the society.
The things that you're talking about, Provost, however, will take time. And of course, we're used to this microwave results society. That we're saying, okay, so we want change. We want to sanitize the country. We want to make sure that we have leaders who are incorruptible. We want to make sure we want it now. We want it in the next government cycle. In the next cycle, we want it now. How comfortable should we be then saying that, look, over time, this thing now, this new sanitization that you've now, quote unquote, infected yourself with, then spreading to other people, it's going to take time and it's not going to be comfortable.
Definitely. Yesterday I had 2 major points. And one was I was questioning on the manifestos. And I asked, are we reading them? Are Kenyans getting value for their taxes? And the text that I was using was Matthew 22, where Jesus says, give Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And give God. Jesus, the question was a loyalty test because of the Roman government. And so they thought, Jesus being revolutionary, he would have said, no, don't pay the tax. Because every Jew from the age of 14 to 65 was meant to pay that particular tax, and they hated it. Jesus says, no, pay the tax. But we stop there. We should ask, what have you done with our money? Because it belongs to you. And again, back to the preacher, Muga. Don't just use one text. Look at the Bible in its totality. The Bible tells me to be able to question that. And so I was asking them, do we listen to what we are being told? And is it sustainable? And can our economy be able to support that? The second point that I made was on our institutions. And I think that's the gist of our discussion this morning. We've realized politicians will come and go. One government comes, changes things, and goes. But what is that anchors a nation to stability? And the example I gave yesterday, City, was we had Trump. With all the problems that Trump had, America continued to be great. Why? You had governors, you had institutions that held the country together. This nation will not be held by a president. And let's not over-empower a president. No, they actually do not even have that level of power. It is the institutions that are important. And I asked, the judiciary is an anchor institution in terms of stability. The media, you guys, your independence is important. When we hear that somebody can buy a newspaper headline, when you hear of brown envelopes in the media and somebody trying to tell you, I'm going to release this unless you pay me, the media is actually auctioning Kenyans. Then the police. Look at the way police are behaving now. When it's around a certain politician who is being supported by the government, they change. We see the police not being independent. The civil service. And yesterday, I actually was against civil servants who are involved in politics. I know the ICT minister tries to justify. Hello, you are in an office that should hold a country, not a political system, together. And lastly, the county governments, the IEBC, and the church. Those are institutions that should hold a country together. Because I support no one as the provost. I may have an individual preference, But because I'm a leader, I lose the right to support a certain candidate publicly. And that's why yesterday I said Tabia Mbaya, what I'm seeing with the president and the deputy. If you have a problem in your marriage, we are your children. We are a product of your union. Behave well. And unfortunately, we don't tell them exactly that. You keep attacking one another. So what are we supposed to do as your children?
Yep, behave well. Provost, thank you very much for coming. The Very Reverend Canon Dr. SAMMY WAINAINA is the Provost of the All Saints Cathedral. He's been here. We're talking about integrity and the role of various institutions in holding this country together. He's told us what institutions we should be looking at and holding ourselves accountable, especially as we head towards the general election. How many days to the general election?
38?
Yeah, I think 38. Yeah.
35.
35.
Yes? 35 days to the general
35.
election. Yes. Keep it here for more conversations coming up throughout the show. Good morning.